Hello and welcome to What the Fact, a weekly show dedicated to helping you untangle the truth from American politics and punditry. I'm Katie Sanders.
And I'm Aaron Schrockman. We're the editors at PolitiFact, America's largest fact-checking website. We've been around since 2007, helping debunk claims in politics and in your newsfeed, on cable television, in blogs, and in the newspaper, wherever you see a statement that you might question. Hopefully, we've helped provide the answer to you. So, Katie, we've been doing this for a while now. So I guess one of the questions that I think people probably often have is like, what does a fact checker do? What's our job? How are we different than a normal journalist or somebody you see on TV?
So I think it's important to remember we are journalists. We're trained journalists. We were practicing news reporting before we joined PolitiFact. But I think the big difference between what we do and what our colleagues in, say, the White House Press Corps do is we focus on very specific statements from politicians, and we fact check those very specific statements. And it really wasn't always the norm for reporters to say what that person said is false, or pants on fire, which is our favorite rating. And we've been doing that for more than 10 years now, and I think it's become really an established form of journalism.
Today's show, for instance, we're going to start by, we're going to go and obviously, as we always do, talk about Donald Trump, and he's talking about things that are important to him, which is should NFL players be allowed to kneel before the national anthem?
Yep.
And so he made a claim about the amount of money that players get in the NFL. So we're going to kind of break that down. He then said another claim that's really important to him, talking about the polls, and in particular one of his rivals and whether he is popular or not. So we're going to get into that a little bit on the show.
Okay, and then after Trump Watch, we're going to take it down to Texas, where there is a very interesting Senate race going on between the incumbent Republican Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, the Democratic challenger. Immigration has been a huge factor in that race, so we're going to untangle two claims from both of those candidates.
Yeah, but we're going to start with a segment we call Newsfeed Nonsense, which is really meant to help you understand kind of claims spinning around the internet and the truth behind them. And in particular, there's been a claim going out recently about LeBron James's, the now LA Laker, his new I Promise school in Akron, Ohio. A lot of fanfare about him opening this school, but some people who I guess are LeBron haters are making claims that really this is just kind of a suck on taxpayer resources. So we're going to figure out what's true and what's not about that in our segment we call Newsfeed Nonsense.
A website called Wannabe Entertainment posted a story claiming LeBron James' I Promise school in Ohio would cost taxpayers millions of dollars. It's true that taxpayers will foot a good chunk of the bill here, but it's not a new cost. They were already paying to send the I Promise students to school. James Foundation works in tandem with the Akron Public School District to house the students. The school is public, so ultimately the government has to pay for it, which means taxpayers have to pay for it. James' program offers additional services at the school, like guest speakers, a food pantry, and GED classes and job placement for parents. The foundation also contributed to some building renovations for the new school and staff hires for the family center inside. The exact breakdown of who paid for what isn't publicly available. So yes, the public is footing the bill for these kids to go to school, but that's how public schools are always run, and there's no new cost here.
So, Aaron, obviously a lot of information was lacking in those headlines that were going around on several websites that we saw on Facebook. The one we decided to fact check was Wannabe Entertainment, which wanted to be right but wasn't all the way right. So we rated this claim half true, which means it's partially accurate.
That was your best joke on the show today, in like 21 episodes, by the way.
I think there's a lot of competition out there. But our definition of half true means it's partially accurate, but it's missing important, crucial details, right?
Yep. Yeah, so again, this is a half true statement. I think the big thing here is LeBron's school is a public school. And as we've talked about, a public school has students that are public school students, and taxpayer money flows with them. So the reality in this case is this is no more of a drain on taxpayer resources than the public school system as a whole, or as it stands in Akron today. So we talked to the superintendent of the school district, who basically laid out that in his mind, what he sees is a very positive thing LeBron is doing for the kids in that community, and that they are going to benefit from the extra additional things and resources LeBron is putting into the school. But like every public school in Akron and in Ohio and across the country. Taxpayer money certainly goes into it. It's a public building, and so the teachers are publicly funded, so that will continue. Nothing will change there. So I think the misleading part here is the idea that, oh, LeBron is just taking from taxpayers and getting all the glory. In actuality, he's kind of trying to make a situation better by investing resources into it. And so, you know, a claim like this is kind of suggesting in some way that he's not doing anything. That's clearly not the case.
So I want to talk about style for a second, because we noticed in a lot of these headlines that were going around, what they were doing was taking reporting that was done from legitimate websites, in this case the website of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, which looked at the taxpayer cost versus foundation cost. And so Wannabe Entertainment lifted the first few paragraphs of that story before going into a completely different editorialized kind of rant that picked up on some of Trump's criticism of LeBron James. So I think that we see that a lot, where we've seen that more and more, where you see this game of newspaper, online website, whatever blog, picking up reporting that's been done, but it kind of just sparks an idea that they turn into something that it was not. All right, well, if you hate half true, you're going to like this next fact check, which kind of, this is another Newsfeed nonsensical story. But this came up on the website American Journal Review, which took a real interview by former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, but tried to spin it in a way, like misrepresents his words. So the headline is, James Clapper flips on live TV, admits Obama behind entire Russia witch hunt video. So we looked at the video in this story and found that the Russia investigation, the Mueller investigation, Russian interference, it can be very confusing and difficult to sort out. This article is exploiting that confusion by totally misrepresenting what James Clapper said. Now, James Clapper was in an interview with CNN's Anderson Cooper, and he brought up a point he'd like to make, and he said,
if it weren't for President Obama, we might not have done the intelligence community assessment that we did that set off a whole sequence of events which are still unfolding today, notably Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. President Obama is responsible for that, and it was he who tasked us to do that intelligence community assessment in the first place.
Now, that does sort of sound like what the headline is talking about, but it's not what Clapper was saying. He is not saying that Obama is behind the entire Russia witch hunt, because frankly, aspects of that investigation had nothing to do with Obama.
Yeah, so this is parroting kind of the language Trump is using, right? So that, and so it's kind of building off of that and looking, I assume, for people who support the president to kind of agree with this narrative. What Clapper here is saying, essentially, there was criticism, and there probably valid criticism, that the Obama administration did not do enough to prevent Russian meddling in the 2016 election. Clapper is essentially saying that the Obama administration did create this intelligence community assessment that kind of showed the first kind of evidence that Russia was meddling in the 2016 election. And if you play that game out down the line, you could make a case that, okay, it's that event, which eventually leads us to Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor. But so yes, in a chain of events, one thing predates the other, but linking them too directly so closely is just folly. I mean, the reality is the special prosecutor was appointed by Rob Rosenstein, who is a Trump appointee. The special prosecutor really only came to be because James Comey was fired. James Comey was fired by Donald Trump. The intelligence community assessment, by the way, was not about Donald Trump and meddling, his potential collusion or interactions with the Russians during the 2016 election. Really, the assessment that James Clapper is talking about is saying Russia is up to no good and trying to meddle in our elections. There wasn't a straight line conclusion that Trump had something to do with it. So again, you're dealing with, in some ways, separate things. And then two, kind of the direct link, while there is a chain of events that one kind of in the timeline follows up until eventually the other, putting them together is kind of a mistake. All right, so now we're going to evaluate some claims from Donald Trump on the other side of this break. He's saying that, talking about NFL players and the national anthem policy debate, debacle, whatever you want to call it, controversy. We're going to break that down, and then also look at some poll numbers of Ohio Governor John Kasich. Donald Trump says Kasich isn't doing so well in Ohio. We'll let you know if that's true when we come back.
Hello and welcome back to What the Fact. I'm Katie and this is Aaron. And now it's time for Trump Watch. This is our weekly look at claims from the Trump administration.
Donald Trump this week has been dealing with some very serious policy issues. No, I'm just kidding. He was talking about the NFL. The president really wanted to own an NFL team. He kind of helped fund the USFL and a rival football league that went out of existence. But he likes to talk about the NFL, in particular, whether or not NFL players should be allowed to kneel in protest of what they say is discriminatory racial policies in the country, not as a protest against the anthem itself. Anyway.
You got to read the whole tweet.
Yeah, I will, of course. So we have Donald Trump here, who has decided to kind of continue to make this his issue. And he tweeted recently, starting with an ellipses, by the way, "Be happy, be cool. A football game that fans are paying so much money to watch and enjoy is no place to protest. Most of that money goes to the players anyway. Find another way to protest. Stand proudly for your national anthem or be suspended without pay." So the president can't order the NFL players suspended without pay, but we could fact check the claim that he says most of the money the NFL makes actually goes to the players. It was an interesting claim and we wanted to see if it's right. And now it's time for Trump Watch.
In another attack on NFL players earlier this month, President Donald Trump claimed most of the money from NFL games goes to the players. That's not true. The president was making a larger point about players being disrespectful when they kneel during the national anthem. He said a football game that fans are paying so much money to watch and enjoy is no place to protest. Most of that money goes to the players anyway. The current collective bargaining agreement between NFL owners and players says the players' share of the money has to average at least 47% over a 10-year term. The NFL Players Association says the current players' share is 48.5%. So it's not much less than 50%, but by the definition of most, it's not accurate to say NFL players make most of the money from NFL games.
All right, Aaron, so as our resident NFL expert, how did we rate this claim?
We rated this claim mostly false, which means that there's a shred of accuracy here, but really it's misleading, and the shred of accuracy is actually pretty much just a shred or a thread. Again, Trump here has claimed that most of the money that made by the NFL goes to the players. That's actually not true by any real definition of most. The NFL union, which represents the players and the owners, are party to a collective bargaining agreement. Basically, it's a contract between the players and the owners to split the revenue that the NFL makes each and every year. They have a contract in place that goes for 10 years. I think it's close to 2021, 2022. And by terms of that agreement, essentially the way the breakdown is that owners get about 52%, players get about 48% of the revenue. It fluctuates every a little bit so players get between 47 and 48%, 48.5% of yearly revenues. Of course, that's less than half and clearly not most. We talked to experts who also said that there's actually buckets of revenue that aren't even included in this revenue share, so that kind of the percentages are a little bit skewed, that owners, when it comes to stadiums, a lot of times have ways to shield some of the money they make away from the players, so owners are getting more money on top that would actually, if you included that in the percentage, the gap would widen even further, so it'd be even greater than 52-48, with the players kind of in the minority there about the money they share. Last point. Owners actually own the team, so that's an asset that they own, and so the players don't benefit from that, for instance. So an owner buys a team and sells it 10 years later, whatever profit they make is obviously on them to make. So NFL players are well compensated, everyone knows that, but the idea that they make most of the money doesn't add up mostly.
All right, so now we're going to Ohio, where Donald Trump is not exactly a fan of Governor John Kasich.
Right.
And he's actually kind of blaming Kasich for what appears to be a very narrow victory by a Republican running in a special election for Congress. So we're going to untangle it for you right now. That's the third time I've used untangle on this show. So Trump, again, on a tweet, said he went after Kasich. He said the very unpopular governor of Ohio, by the way, and failed presidential candidate John Kasich.
He never forgets.
Those were parentheses. Hurt Troy Balderson's recent win by tamping down enthusiasm for an otherwise great candidate. He went on to blame Kasich and said Kasich's lieutenant governor lost the governor's race because of his unpopularity. Credit to Troy on the big win. This is a tweet on August 13th. John Kasich didn't seem to agree. He responded on Twitter with a gif of Vladimir Putin laughing. So what can we fact check from that? We focused on the Balderson connection and really on Kasich's unpopularity. But here's the deal. Why was Trump upset? Well, first of all, Kasich was on Meet the Press criticizing the Trump team, saying it wasn't a good night for Balderson because this is a district that you should be winning by, overwhelming numbers.
Right. Trump won it by 11 points in 2016. Balderson appears like he's going to squeak out a victory. In many ways, this is kind of just like a symbolic race because both the candidates are going to run again in November. So we're going to be back and doing this again.
Yeah.
But Republicans spent a lot of money to try to hold this seat. It appears they will by the skin of their teeth. And this is why we have this little infighting between two prominent Republicans, John Kasich, governor of Ohio,
who isn't ruling out another 2020 run against Trump. And he won Ohio back in 2016 in the primary against Trump. However, let's get back to the fact check, which is that he is very unpopular in Ohio.
He was.
That was the case. In March 2011, Kasich's favorability was an abysmal 30%, but that was a long time ago, and his popularity has later increased. We looked at a compilation of many recent polls and saw that he had largely positive approval ratings. I'm not going to get too bogged down in the numbers, but I will single out one Quinnipiac poll in just June 2018 that 52% of Ohio voters overall approved of Kasich, while 36% disapproved. That's a plus 16 spread, which is pretty good. He's
certainly better than the president nationally.
Yes, there's an irony there that we will get to. Kasich is actually doing better with Republicans than, he's doing better with Democrats than with fellow Republicans. They approve of him more in terms of spread, although he had a 46% approval among Republicans. Kasich has done some more moderate things, such as criticizing Trump, and he supported Medicaid expansion in his state, which came up during his 2016 run. Right. But overall, we talked to the experts of political statistics and polling, and they said Kasich remains overall popular. As for what Trump said, that he is just extremely unpopular, that rate's false. Yeah.
So next we're going to continue our tour of the 2018 battleground states. We're going to Texas, where it's a state Democrats don't have many big hopes to have big pickups in the 2018 Senate races, but they are counting on Beto O'Rourke in Texas. They think he's raising a lot of money, doing a lot of good things, and so we're going to put him and Ted Cruz, his opponent, on the Truth-O-Meter when we get back. Hey everybody, and welcome back to What the Fact. I'm Aaron, this is Katie, and now we're going to continue our tour of 2018 battlegrounds. We're going to be doing this every week between now and Election Day. This week we're going to Texas. It's a state Democrats have hopes to have a Senate pickup in 2018. It's not a long shot, but it is a tough race. Beto O'Rourke is running as the Democrat, raising a lot of money from small individual donors, not taking big PAC money. He's up against Ted Cruz, who obviously is a national figure, ran for president in 2016. In a fairly red state, it's an uphill battle, but Democrats think they have a chance. And so we're going to look at a pair of claims, really centering on one of the big issues in Texas. Obviously, it's a border state, immigration. And so both candidates are making a lot of claims about this, some more right than others. We're going to take a look at first on a claim from Ted Cruz, who's talking about Beto O'Rourke saying he wants to abolish ICE, the Customs Enforcement Agency. Is that true? Let's find out.
Senator Ted Cruz is facing a tighter than expected race for his seat in Texas, and he's going negative against his opponent.
Not even Nancy Pelosi is open to abolishing ICE, but Beto is.
Let's fact check that. There's a little context we should add here. It's true that Beto O'Rourke said he was open to getting rid of ICE, but only if its responsibilities were shifted to other agencies in the process. But when he was asked about abolishing ICE as a single action, O'Rourke said no, he wouldn't support that. Instead, he talked about abolishing certain tactics the agency uses. So it's accurate to say Beto O'Rourke is open to abolishing ICE, but there's some critical context missing in Cruz's claim.
All right, Katie. So Ted Cruz is someone we fact-checked a lot on the Truth and Meter. His record isn't typically that good. In this case, though, he ends up getting a mostly true rating, claiming that Beto O'Rourke is open to abolishing ICE. I assume that word "open" is a big part of how we got to that rating.
I think it is, because you could argue he's just as open to keeping ICE in operation. And I think that the missing caveats in Cruz's attack is that Beto O'Rourke has repeatedly said he doesn't want to just abolish enforcement of immigration laws altogether. And I think some people kind of confuse what abolishing ICE would actually mean. So here, he was asked flatly whether he would abolish ICE, and he said no. But he did say he doesn't know enough about how those duties would be transferred. He's always said he needs to see more details. He said he understands the urgency of this. This is as recently as July 2018. He was quoted at a campaign stop talking about this. But he's certainly open to another way to rethinking how ICE works, and particularly the Trump administration's enforcement of admissions along the border. He has been very vocal against ICE tactics in detaining families, separating families, etc. But he said he wants to make sure that all laws are enforced. We want to make sure laws reflect who we are. And he did say that we change those laws to make sure that we make the most out of all of us, then I'm open to that. So he did use the word open to it, but he's not exactly calling for it, which I think could get lost with some people who are hearing Cruz's attack. All right, let's move on to another one. This time,
from Beto.
Yep, this time O'Rourke's on the Truth-O-Meter. Now, this is something he has said, he's on the record as saying a bit ago, but we were still very curious because we've fact-checked claims that terrorists are capable of entering through the southwest border many times. And O'Rourke made an interesting claim that we needed to check out. So he said, precisely 0 terrorist groups, or terror plots have ever been connected with the U.S.-Mexico border to do harm to people within the United States. Now, this is a very familiar topic for us. We found 9 past PolitiFact fact checks of border terrorist claims that did not prove accurate, coming largely from Republicans. But we did also check a claim in PolitiFact Florida a few years ago that found mostly true that U.S. Customs and Border Protection had apprehended several members of known Islamist terrorist organizations crossing the southern border in recent years. So you have to be careful about how you're framing this issue, and here O'Rourke is not so careful.
Yep. I think just like as we talked about Ted Cruz carefully using the word open to abolishing ICE in the previous fact check, here Beto makes a mistake of being so precise when he says precisely 0 terrorists or terrorist groups have attempted to infiltrate or connected with U.S.-Mexico border and attempting to do harm. Broad view. The U.S. government generally says that they are not aware of any organized efforts by terrorist groups that cross the southern border into the United States and do harm to the United States. If you look at most of the history, you will find very little or no attempts in which the southern border was kind of the point in which people tried to cross to get in to do harm to this country. However, saying precisely 0 is precisely wrong. That's going to do it for What the Fact for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I think we imparted some good factual information, I hope.
I hope so too.
And we're going to do it again next week. So until then, I'm Aaron and this is Katie. See you.